Planet Earth, as we all know it, was perfectly designed to host all the inhabitants, whether living and non-living. But as time lapses, the greed and the imperfection of the human race makes every great effort by the intellectual mind behind this great planet dwindle day in, day out. Welcome to our three-part series on the effects of a single story. Today we are going to crisscross the paths of the words and the dynamic impact of a single story in our social, economic, and spiritual lives. On this series, we are going to shake your beliefs and pose cognitive question on whether what you term as truth, is it relative truth or absolute truth? Does what you believe hold much more water than the other person's beliefs? Social anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss developed a theory of binary opposition, stating that there are two concepts in opposition to one another. In our three-part series, we are going to use this concept to show how a single story can lead to discrimination and prejudice. In our first part, we are going to look at the effects of a single story in our social lives. But before I introduce my guest, I would like to pose this question to you, my viewer. As war in Ukraine escalates, we have seen through different media outlets how Africans are stranded in various bus and train stations or others having to walk for long distances because Ukrainians are given first priority during the relocation. Should we term this as racism or negligence by the African governments who should have evacuated their citizens earlier? Anyway, I would like my guest to introduce himself.
Mr. Dennis Mutua, a student and also a researcher.
Welcome to our program.
Yeah.
So, take us through how a single story personally affected your social life while you are growing up.
You see, in my community and personally where I've been brought up and I'll say like from class 1, we've been reading stories about this community in Kenya which practices FGM. And so, this is what I've been shown and I've been told that these guys practice FGM. So I grew up knowing that these guys practice FGM, these guys are married off early. So when I came to campus, I knew that it's the probability of finding this community in campus, it's like 0. Or maybe finding a girl who has not gone through FGM, it's very hard. But coming to campus and it's like what I knew, it's different because these guys, they are here. These guys have not been married off at an early age and many of them have not gone through FGM. Actually, I've never met a girl from this community that has gone through FGM. So the stories I was reading back then when I was a kid, and the stories I was being told, it's like the opposite of what I've found out right now.
And still on stories, let's talk about media and literature books. Do you think that they play a part in telling a single story?
Media, I would say that media is the catalyst to everything. You see, without media, we can't be able to pass information. The same with books. Books are used to store information. What I was telling about, the story I was telling about FGM, it's through these small books we used to read when we were kids. We were reading about kids being married off at an early age. So you see, these are the things which carry single stories. Media is the key to single stories because these single stories are told, but media airs them out. Like for example, in the European countries, they are shown that about Asian countries. They are shown that these guys, all they do is just bombings, suicide bombers and such things, and it is shown through TV and media. So you see, media is the key thing to single stories.
You have talked about the European countries. Let's talk about the problem of creating a distance between us and them. Do you think it creates prejudice? Example of how Africa is always portrayed as a continent which is full of a single story of suffering from different catastrophes and living on top of trees with wild animals.
Yeah, it creates a lot of prejudice between us and them, and sometimes hatred, you see. So I'll say that you see a guy from abroad will call you anytime and is like, hey, but you are an African, yeah. I hear you guys live with monkeys, and you're like, wait, are you like for real? Or the only time I see monkeys is when I go to the zoo or a game park. I don't see, actually it can take me 2 years to see a monkey. But this guy, he's been stereotyped to think that we guys, we live with monkeys. So you see, it creates some hatred between us and them, because you see, you can't take somebody who is like, it's because that's a direct insult. Yeah. You can't take somebody who is insulting you and you're like, I'm cool with you. So it creates anger issues and prejudice between us and them.
Do you think like ignorance also plays a part? Because you have said like a guy will text you like, can you take a picture while you're strolling with, let's say, a lion?
Yeah.
Do you think like they know that we do not live with lions, but they just ignore the fact like we are human beings, like we are developed, we are evolving?
Yeah, actually it's all about ignorance. This guy is ignoring the fact that we are moving, we are strides ahead of where we were. You see, it will be, actually it's not like we used to live there, but it's like almost where we used to back then, how to live. But you see, these guys have come here and they've witnessed the change, but it's still they don't want to accept that these guys have changed. That the stories we were being told about these guys are a lie. Yeah. They just want to live with this thing, knowing that these guys they live with monkeys, they can walk with lions wherever they want. They just want this thing to stick in their mind, because they don't want to accept that we guys have changed and we are moving forward.
Finally, do you believe that, quotes, quote and off quote, we must see the world in patterns in order to make sense of it? Otherwise, we couldn't be able to deal with the daily onslaught of people and objects if we couldn't predict a lot about them and feel who and what they are. And what are the impacts of this statement?
You see, this statement, it basically wants us to, you see, go out there, experience. You go out there, live the life these people live, so that when you're writing a story about them, you can at least write it from a perspective where I've lived with these guys. If you're telling me to take a picture with a lion, I've lived with this guy and I have seen this guy walk with the lion. So you see, we have to create these patterns that I can go, let's say for example, I can go to live in the US. Like I've been shown everywhere I see in the TV, in the everything. I only see life as smooth in the US. But typically when I go there, is it the truth? So we need to ask ourselves that, is it what I'm seeing, is it the truth? If I was to go and live there, will this be the truth? Will I live the life I've been seeing on TV? The same thing with them. They should ask themselves, this story I'm writing, this story I'm telling about these guys are Africans or Asians. These guys are suicide bombers. If I go and live them, and if I went there and live with them, is this the truth? Are these guys what we tell them to be? And if we happen to do that, we'll be telling straightforward stories. A story based on truth and based on something you know, not based on a stereotype that has been created in your mind.
All right, that was Dennis for you. Thank you for participating in our program.
Welcome.
We have come to the end of our first part of the series. See you tomorrow for the second part. It is unfortunate that Africa as a continent perpetually suffers from what Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie terms as a single story. A story that displaces a multi-layered reality about unfamiliar people, a region or a nation, and can lead to costly mistakes or missed business opportunities. In the second part of this series, we are going to look at the effects of a single story on economic development of a nation or a region. Did you know that a growing body of research shows that stories increase empathy and understanding? They also affect our judgment and attitude, with a good example being of the stories told by the media outlets from outside Africa as a continent which is fully infested with AIDS and hunger-stricken, or the images painted by the print media of refugees dying at sea. Such stereotyping creates only one story, a story that subverts a myriad other stories of courage, beauty, development, happiness, and resilience. With me here is Mr. Collins, who is going to help us understand the impact of a single story on the economic growth of a nation or a region. Hello, sir.
Hello.
So I'd like us to chit-chat on these issues.
Yes.
So according to you, do you think of any single story that has marginalized a state, nation, or a continent from economic development?
So a story. Yeah, I can give you, for instance, in Africa as a continent, we have a country like Somalia. You see, in Somalia, what the media portrays is about the negative side. When you hear of Somalia, you think of terrorism. We can see of the Al-Shabaab, of how they affect the Somalia, but the media does not show us on the positive side. We have a lot of positive side on Somalia. We can also see countries like Mexico. When you hear about Mexico, you think of the El Chapo, the drugs, they use the hard drugs, but we do not know about the other side, the positive side of theirs. Yes.
Even when you look at Colombia, can you say something about Colombia?
And Colombia is also the same. We can see that people are dying, people are suffering, people are using drugs, but the media does not also show us that Colombia has a good side. You see, if maybe we could have been shown of the positive side, it could have been better for people not to know about the negative sides.
But don't you think it is important also for people to know the negative side? Because if you rely only on the positive side, what if, let's say, you're traveling from point A to B, and you only know that point B, which is your destination, you only know the positive side about it, but you don't know, like, maybe there are rapists there.
You see, the negative side does not always occur. Okay, every country has a negative side, even where you come from. Even maybe you are coming from, let's say, Nairobi to Mombasa. Nairobi has its negative sides, and also Mombasa has its negative sides. So maybe what we should focus more on is the positive sides, not the negative sides.
And still sticking on that, do you think like the local stories can challenge the Western-led definition and perception that steer economic development, and how?
The Western stories, yeah, we can look maybe on, let's take for instance our country, Kenya. If maybe we can be shown on the cultures, the traditions, on how the government is going to invest on that, on those sectors, okay? The tourism sector, you see, if we get to learn more about the tourism, about the cultural ways, maybe our economy, not even maybe, obvious, the economy will grow.
Still on that tourism sector, do you think like, you have talked about our nation Kenya, do you think like we can sustain our tourism sector without the foreigners?
Yes, we can.
How?
You see, all we have to do is the government can just come up with programs. These programs are going to show our Kenyans, us as Kenyans, more of our tourism. Okay, you see, it's not a must that foreigners should come and see what we have in Kenya. Even us ourselves, we can just explore in the tourism sector, and we can just, through us ourselves, as we just invest in it.
So would you agree that part of quote-unquote single story problem is the assumption that poverty is confined to quote-unquote developing countries, and that deep debilitating inequality is shamefully present in the world's richest nations?
Yeah, in the world's richest nations, let's say like the USA, in the States. You see that country, it's like they are living in two different planets. We have the blacks, so we have the majority, and the whites. Okay, you see the blacks do not have that good life, and their economy is very low. You see, they are living in bad lives, low lives. But on the other side, when you see the white people, they have a very good life.
But we also have black people who are living their life, as they say, and we also have the white people who are still suffering.
Okay, you see, but this is inequality. Okay, these countries, you see, we all know about racism. Okay, so we are looking at the inequality, right? So the blacks are more subjected to the lower economy. Yes, we have the whites who are suffering, of course. We can have countries like South Korea. South Korea, you see, even the whites are committing suicide. They're dying of what do we call it? Low life management. They don't have that good life. Okay, so it's not about maybe whites or blacks. It's about the inequality that they have there that makes their economy low.
And still on that, can branding change the single story narrative and improve the economy of a place?
Yeah, branding can. Even if we have companies, we have the media, they'll just portray the positive sides. This is why I was talking about the positive sides. You see, if the media starts giving us more good side of like Somalia, it can go to Somalia and show us that maybe Somalia has fertile soil. This fertile soil can make investors come. In our country, we have countries like Samburu and Turkana. Instead of focusing on the hunger they have and how they are suffering, maybe they can just focus on, like Turkana, we have fuel. You see, at this stage we have like the fuel shortage. If the media can just go to Turkana and tell us more of that, maybe Turkana has this oil, maybe investors can come and open petrol stations. These petrol stations will be able to supply oil all over the country. So branding can increase the economy.
And finally, let's talk about the Chinese. We all know the Chinese. Chinese in Africa. A lot of pictures have been painted about them, the dark pictures. Like it's a nation's bigotry and greed for African natural resources. Do you think like the Chinese play a key role in Africa development, economy-wise?
Yes, they do. You see, people do not want to admit that the Chinese help us, but the Chinese help us a lot. If it was not for the Chinese, we could not have built the SGR.
Why are you calling them the Chinese?
The Chinese, okay, the Chinese. I'm very sorry. Okay, the Chinese. If it is not for the Chinese, we could have not built the SGR. Okay, so the Chinese play a key role in helping us as Africa grow. And maybe if we accept that more, we can get people learning even skills, like the engineers. The engineers can learn more skills from the Chinese, and maybe even they can steal the skills and bring the skills to our country, so that even when we hire our own
engineers. You have just said steal. Should they steal or just learn and come and give us the information?
Okay, let's say learn, okay. But it's the same. It's the same.
No, it's not the same.
Okay, let's let them learn. Okay, if they learn more, they learn more about the Chinese techniques and skills of how they build their systems. They'll just come and invest. Maybe when they get hired in our countries, they can just, we see, employers will not have any need for the Chinese anymore, because when we have engineers of our own with the same skills as them, we don't need the Chinese coming to build for us. So you just need our own. Okay, yes, the Chinese, they also help us in play big roles. We can see they have helped us build roads, the railways, and if we accept this more, we can have facilities like the hospitals, more universities, more schools. Yeah, and this will just boost up the economy very high.
All right, we have just come to the end of our episode 2, man. And according to Mr. Collins, branding, it's all about branding. If you brand well, you'll make it.
Yes.
Yeah, man, thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
In our final part of this series, we are going to delve into a topic that most people fear talking about. This is a subject that would like you to be open-minded throughout the discussion. Before we begin, my guest had this to say.
A few years ago, I didn't used to like the Bible so much. You see, I've always believed in God, always. But I had my different thoughts about the Bible, and I thought back then that the Bible somehow pictured a weak God, you know, a God who is emotional, God who gets mad and murders people, you know, a God who gets happy and blesses people, a God who sometimes vanishes and lets his people suffer, you know, Israelites in Egypt for decades. And I felt that, why is this God like this? Why does he leave his people sometimes? You know, and this Bible, this Bible is telling us about a God who is weak, and that's not a God I believe in. I believe in an almighty God who is all strong and all good.
According to my guest, after changing his perception of God, he gradually started believing in the teachings of Christianity dogma.
I got to ask myself this: if God created us in his own image, you see, in his own image, in who he is, and yet here I was wanting to see God from my eyes, you see, from my assumptions, from what I wanted him to be, from what I was creating him to be from my mind, not what he created me to be. You see, and that's a disconnect here, there, right there. It's a disconnect, because now that was me pushing myself to see my God according to what I want him to be, and yet he created me according to what he is, who he is.
Today, I'm glad to host Mr. Robert Gabriel, who has an in-depth understanding of religious studies.
One of the questions that actually triggered all my curiosity towards religion and everything was this exact question, you see. Why do we have different gods but one Satan? And what stereotypes does this kind of thinking produce? You see, when you take out the context of culture in all this, it yields to some of the deep-seated roots of atheism, you see. Because now you have people who are not taking each and every scenario into they're not bringing culture into the picture, you see. They're not bringing people's mindset, how people grew up in different settings of societies into the context. When you do that, when you take out the culture picture from this question, you of course will give birth to a lot of stereotypes. Could a world without us and them be, in the context that can we exist in a world where there are no rights and wrongs? You know, I'd like to say this to start with, that sometimes we forget that actually when we say about we have to struggle and strive towards the highest moral good, we also think that maybe you don't have to struggle towards the lowest moral goods or the evil things in life. We have to struggle towards them too. You know, if you decide to live an honest life and you work hard for it, doesn't mean that a thief doesn't work hard to steal. They work hard to steal. You know, they come through your roof at night. That's hard work. You see, they stay up at night planning how to raid banks and everything. They dig tunnels underground. That's still work. So the notion that you have to struggle towards living a good life in the context of morals is way more difficult than living in the bad life. It's not true. Both sides of the coin are hard work, and life is like that in either side of the coin, whatever you decide to do. If you decide to sell drugs, my friend, it is still hard work. If you decide that you're gonna be an engineer, work hard towards your goals in life, still hard work. Whichever side of the coin there is, still hard work. So I'd like first to take away that scenario out of the picture. And then now when we go to answer this question, we still have to go back to the context of God and Satan. You see, when you say that good, what is good? Bad, what is bad? You know, what culture are you in?
According to Mr. Robert, the person who pushes the agenda determines the entire outcome.
A few decades ago, it was good to own a human being, you know, slavery. In some cultures, it was good. But when we came back to the people who were owned, it was wrong. How did we coexist up until now? Again, we go back to the same context. Who is pushing this narrative of what is good and what is wrong at the same time? So now we have got to go back to God. You see, what does the word does the word of God tell us, and in what religion are we talking from? Are we talking from Christianity? Is it Muslim? You know, is it what, Buddhism? Is it Satanism? You see, where are we talking from when you are talking about what is good and what is bad? And as far as I am a Christian, so my moral good, it will always be aligned to the Christian beliefs of God, and also my personal belief of who God is. Because again, I repeat this, who God is to me is different from who God is to anyone else. You see, God is personal as much as his religion is personal to somebody. So going back to this, yes, we can exist. You see, we can exist, we can coexist where there is us and them, in the context that we will always strive to get better in each and every day from who we were yesterday to being the person who we will become tomorrow. You see, and if the world was created in a scenario where everything was flat, you know, like we were all good, I don't know what kind of a world that would be. Religious books and culture versus the one-sided story narrative. I think personally I speak about the Bible when it comes to religious books, and the Bible is one book that has, I think it encompasses different cultures in the sense that the Bible in itself is a library. It is a combination, bringing together of so many books, and these books were written across generations.
Mr. Robert thinks that inasmuch as the Bible is a literature book, it tells the entire story of its characters, hence disqualifying it as a single story narration.
I honestly do not think that the Bible is a single story narrative. You see, for instance, when we can even go deeper and look at some of the books in the Bible, and we can look at the life of Apostle Paul. You see, Apostle Paul, you see two sides of his life. You know, there is this first side where he's a crucifier of Christians, and then there's the other side where he's a fighter for Christians, you know. And we also look at people like Solomon and David, who started like, you know, with good morals and everything, and then somewhere they messed up along the way, and the ending was not so good. You see, now in single story narratives, that's not always the case, you see, because we in the single stories narrative, you are given a single-sided eye into the lives of people. You know, you are not shown all sides of the coin, and that the single story narratives yields discrepancies in how we see things. You know, for instance, Chimamanda said that when she went to America, you know, her roommate expected some backwardish, you know, uncivilized person, and yet there she was. You see, so when we go back to the Bible, are these stories in the Bible backwardish according to the culture that they were written? Are they? Can we bring what the Bible stories into context today? I'll tell you that for free. Yes, we can do that. So when you talk about post-colonialism and the colonies, of course, you know, the colonial masters had so much influence on the religious outcomes of the colonies, because you may find that, for instance, here in Kenya, the kind of missionaries that settled in certain different regions determined the religious outcomes of those regions. For instance, you find that in central Kenya there were the Roman Catholics. So the missionaries who came in these areas were Catholics. You find that there are Anglicans in other areas, you know, and depending on these guys, we have different systems of beliefs, or in Christianity still, in different regions of Kenya. And this is also true even to other countries and other places. For instance, so you find that when you come here in Kenya and go to Mombasa, at the coast, where there was a huge settlement of the Arabs and Muslims, the culture there is, the religion there is mostly Islamic. And if you go to a place like Zanzibar, another country, that is also true. You see, when you go to West African countries, everywhere in the world where you go, the colonial masters had so much influence on the religions that the colonies would follow later in life. Because has religion been used negatively in the past? Not even only by the colonial masters. Yes, it has been used to control people. And that is one of the reasons why, you see, most colonies would find that they were rejecting these religions. You see, for instance, here in Kenya, they would reject the Bible, they would reject Christianity, because they felt that they were being told to be submissive by religion. You see, and this narrative has affected generations even up until now. So yes, I think that Orientalism has affected the modern humanity thinking when it comes to religion, because either, whether you are trying to run away from the person who brought these ideas to you, the colonist, for instance, if you are trying to run away from them, means that that person has influenced you to run away from that. And if you are implementing what he taught you and he brought to you, that means you are influenced 100%. And that brings the question of, would Christianity be this famous around the globe without colonialism, without the Europeans coming and attacking each and everyone in the globe? I don't know, but I think yes. And I think yes, according to this context. When you go to, I think it's London, there is a library with a whole floor of the history of the Bible, and these are texts that have been collected from Africa to Asia, you know, Europe. Like each and every continent, there is a history of the Bible way before colonialism. So yes, it has affected, Orientalism has affected the way we think about religion today, in the context that the religion was used to control masses. There is something that we forget each and every day, that we are actually living in the information period, where if you need to know anything, you can just dig up and you'll have multiple stories about that very thing coming to you. You know, just for your phone, you have the internet, there are libraries that are full of books. We are no longer back in the days where these things were not available. So how to change the single story narrative? The only challenge that stands between you and the single story narrative is you not wanting to know more, is you not wanting to find out more. And I'll quote the Bible, that where God says, "My people perish because of ignorance." You see, lack of knowledge.
As we come to the end of our 3-part series, I hope we'll take it upon ourselves to make the world a better place by enlightening ourselves in the context of reading and telling the entire story of a region, a person, or a continent. I'll leave you with this story from Mr. Robert Gabriel.
I told you before that I didn't believe in the Bible, but I believe in God. And I had a single story narrative. When I was young, I had eye problems. You see, this very documentary that we are having here might be on TV and will be on TV. But I was told that I could not even watch that TV by the time I got to class 5, because I was going to be blind. And I was told, my parents were told that I should quit school. because the more I study, the more I stress my eyes to study, the more I'll become blinder way much sooner than later. But I think my dad was hard now, because he said no child of his will be illiterate, and he said that I must continue to school. If I become blind, I'll still go to school. So I continued with school, but I'm not blind. Seems science was wrong. The doctors were wrong. I'm here. I can see. I do not have eye problems no more. And for this story alone, I believed in God with so much conviction that you could not tell me anything else. But at the same time, there is another story. You see, there is a person who was born with difficulties. You see, maybe they didn't have hands, and maybe they lost their parents when they were young, and maybe their house was bombed when they were young. Do these people believe in God? Yes, they do. You see, do they have anything interesting testimony to tell you? No, they don't. They have, and these are real people who are going through these things. Their only good thing that they have in life is their life, their breath. They are alive, they are living, but they are struggling so much that you look at their lives and think, is there a God? These are two different stories. From my end, I saw what God did for me. What are they seeing from their end? These are two different stories about the same God.